The forest was silent, wrapped in a thick blanket of snow. The trees stood tall like frozen giants, their branches heavy with frost. In the heart of this cold wilderness, a stray dog moved carefully, its thin body shivering with every step. His fur was matted, his ribs showed through his skin, but his eyes still held a quiet strength. He had no name, no home, and no one to call his own. The dog had spent years wandering, searching for scraps, avoiding danger, and surviving against all odds. But tonight was different. Tonight, something pulled at him. An instinct, a feeling he could not ignore. His ears perked up. A faint sound drifted through the trees, almost lost in the howling wind. A soft, fragile cry. His heart pounded as he followed the sound, his paws crunching against the frozen ground. The scent in the air was unfamiliar, yet something deep inside told him it was important. As he pushed through the bushes, his eyes widened. There, lying on a bed of fallen leaves, was a baby. A tiny, helpless baby wrapped in a thin blanket, its face red from the cold. The child's little hands trembled, its cries weak but desperate. The dog froze. He had seen many things in his life: hunger, loneliness, the cruelty of the world, but never had he seen something so fragile, so in need of help. His breath came out in short puffs of steam. He knew he could turn away, continue his lonely existence. But something inside him refused. He stepped closer, sniffing the child gently. The baby's tiny fingers reached out, brushing against his cold nose. In that moment, something changed. What happens next is nothing short of a miracle. This stray, once abandoned by the world, was about to become the only hope for a life hanging by a thread. But would he be able to save the child before it was too late? Stay with us till the end to witness a story that will restore your faith in miracles. The dog hesitated for only a moment before his instincts took over. The cold wind howled through the trees, sending a fresh wave of icy air over the fragile child. The baby's cries grew weaker. The dog could sense the danger. This little life was slipping away. With a deep breath, he moved closer, pressing his warm body against the child. His fur was not much of a shield, but it was better than nothing. The baby stirred, sensing the warmth, and the dog felt something stir in himself too. This was not just survival anymore, this was a mission. But the forest was no place for a child. The dog knew he had to act fast. He nudged the baby gently with his nose, but the infant was too weak to respond. His heart pounded. He had to find help. Lifting his head, he let out a low whimper, then a louder bark. The sound echoed through the silent trees, but no one answered. He barked again, more urgently this time, his voice carrying across the frozen landscape. Nothing. No response. Time was running out. The dog made a decision. One that would change everything. He gently gripped the corner of the thin blanket in his mouth and began to pull. Slowly, carefully, he dragged the child forward, step by step, his paws sinking into the snow. He did not know where he was going, but he knew he had to keep moving. His legs ached, his body shivered, but he did not stop. Through the darkness, he pushed forward, his ears alert for any sign of help. Then, just as exhaustion threatened to take over, he heard something, a distant sound. A car engine. His heart leaped. Hope. Summoning his last bit of strength, he changed direction, moving toward the road. The headlights appeared through the trees, bright against the darkness. The dog barked wildly, his voice desperate, his body blocking the path. The tires screeched as the car came to a sudden stop. The door flew open, and a gasp filled the night air. Oh my God! There is a baby! What happened next would prove that miracles still exist. The woman's hands trembled as she knelt down in the snow, her breath visible in the freezing air. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. A baby, helpless, barely moving, wrapped in a thin blanket, and beside it, a stray dog, his eyes filled with desperation. She reached out, scooping the child into her arms, pressing the baby close to her chest. "It is freezing," she whispered, her voice shaking. The baby's skin was cold, but there was still warmth, still life. She had to act fast. The dog watched anxiously as the woman rushed to her car, carefully placing the baby inside. But just as she was about to get in, she turned back to him. Their eyes met, and for a moment she understood. This dog had saved the child's life. "Come on," she said softly, opening the passenger door. The dog hesitated, but then, as if understanding, he leaped in. The car sped off toward the hospital, the woman glancing at the baby in the back seat, then at the dog beside her. He sat upright, his body tense, ears perked. "You did something incredible, buddy," she murmured, gripping the steering wheel. At the hospital, nurses and doctors rushed forward as soon as she arrived. The child was whisked away, but even as the doors swung shut, the dog refused to move. He sat near the entrance, his tail still, his eyes locked on the door. He was waiting. Hours passed. The woman sat beside him, running her fingers through his fur. "You are not just a stray, are you?" she said softly. "You were meant to be here." Then, finally, a doctor appeared. "The baby is stable," he announced. "It is a miracle he survived." Relief flooded her chest. She turned to the dog, smiling through her tears. "Did you hear that? You saved him." But the story was far from over. News spread quickly. An abandoned baby, a stray dog, and an unbelievable rescue. The next day, reporters gathered outside the hospital, eager to know more. The woman, who had found the child, shared the incredible story, but the real hero was the dog. Cameras flashed, microphones were pushed forward, and soon, people everywhere were talking about the stray dog who had saved a life. But through it all, the dog stayed close to the woman, never straying too far from the hospital entrance. Then something unexpected happened. A police officer approached, holding a solemn expression. "We have been looking into where the baby came from," he said. "And we might have found something." The woman's heart pounded. The dog lifted his head. The truth was about to be revealed. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines. The baby, now wrapped in warm blankets, slept peacefully in a crib. The woman sat beside him, gently brushing a hand over his tiny fingers. She had not even realized how deeply she had come to care for this child. Beside her, the stray dog lay curled up, his body relaxed for the first time since the rescue. But his ears twitched at every sound, his protective instincts still sharp. Then, the door creaked open. A police officer stepped in, his face serious. The woman's heart pounded. She had been waiting for this moment, the answer to the question that had haunted her since she found the baby in the forest. "We found the baby's mother," the officer said. The woman inhaled sharply. The dog lifted his head, eyes locked onto the officer as if he, too, understood the weight of those words. "She was found unconscious near the outskirts of town," the officer continued. "She had collapsed from exhaustion, likely after wandering in the storm. She was in shock when she woke up but kept asking about her baby." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. This mother had not abandoned her child. She had been lost, helpless in the storm, just like the baby. She had tried to find shelter, the officer explained. But when she could not go any farther, she must have left the baby somewhere safe, hoping someone would find him. The woman's breath caught in her throat. Someone had found him. The stray dog had found him. Her gaze shifted to the dog, who sat quietly by her feet, his tail wagging slightly, as if he knew. He had saved not just the baby, but an entire family from heartbreak. Then the door opened again. A nurse entered, leading a frail-looking woman inside. She was wrapped in a hospital gown, her eyes red from crying. But when she saw the crib, her body trembled. The mother rushed forward, her hands covering her mouth as she looked down at her child. Then, she broke into sobs, carefully scooping the baby into her arms. The woman watched, her own eyes brimming with tears. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper before settling against his mother's chest. At that moment, the stray dog stood up and walked closer. The mother's eyes widened as she looked at him. You saved my baby," she whispered, kneeling down. The dog wagged his tail, inching closer. Then, to everyone's surprise, he pressed his head against her knee, as if to say, "Yes, I did." The room fell silent. The weight of what had happened, the sheer miracle of it all, was almost too much to take in. The woman wiped her tears, placing a hand on the dog's back. "You are a hero," she murmured. But what would happen next? Would this stray, this guardian angel in disguise, finally find a home of his own? The answer was just moments away. As the sun set beyond the hospital windows, casting a warm, golden light into the room, the woman found herself sitting quietly beside the mother and her child. The baby had fallen asleep in his mother's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. The dog lay curled at their feet, his eyes half closed but his ears still alert. The mother looked up, her eyes meeting the woman's with a depth of gratitude that words could not convey. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. "Without you and him, I would have lost everything." The woman smiled softly, her hand gently stroking the dog's fur. "It was not me," she replied, glancing down at the loyal creature beside her. "It was him. He found her baby. He saved him." Tears welled up in the mother's eyes as she reached down, her fingers brushing over the dog's head. "You are not just a stray," she murmured. "You are a guardian angel." The dog responded with a gentle wag of his tail, his eyes shining with a wisdom beyond his years. It was as if he understood the impact of his actions, the lives he had saved, and the love he had brought back together. Days passed, and the story of the stray dog's bravery spread throughout the community. People came to the hospital, bringing treats and blankets for the dog, thanking him for his extraordinary act of kindness. Yet, through all the attention, he remained humble, never straying far from the mother and her child. One evening, as the woman prepared to leave, she paused at the door, looking back at the little family. "What will you do now?" she asked gently. The mother looked down at the dog, her hand resting on his head. "I lost my way in the storm, but he led me back," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "I cannot leave him now. He is family." And so, the dog, once a nameless wanderer, became a cherished member of a family that he had saved from unimaginable loss. No longer did he roam the cold, empty streets. Instead, he found warmth, love, and a place where he truly belonged. The woman walked out of the hospital, her heart full, knowing that miracles did happen, and sometimes they came in the form of a stray dog with a brave heart. But what lay ahead for this newly formed family? The journey was not over, and the best was yet to come. In the days that followed, the once lonely stray dog became a permanent part of the little family he had saved. No longer wandering the cold streets, he now had a name, Leo. The mother and her baby had found not only a protector, but a loyal companion who had risked everything for them. As winter faded into spring, the bond between Leo and the child grew stronger. Every morning, the mother would watch with a grateful heart as Leo sat by the baby's crib, his watchful eyes filled with love and devotion. No longer a stray, no longer forgotten, he had found his home, and he had given them hope in return. One afternoon, the woman who had first found Leo visited the family. Seeing him curled up peacefully at their feet, she smiled. "He was never just a stray," she said softly. "He was meant to be here." The mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, he was." Leo, as if understanding every word, lifted his head and let out a contented sigh. He had found the place where he truly belonged. This was more than a story of rescue. It was a story of fate, kindness, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. And for those who still wandered the streets, waiting for their chance at love and warmth, perhaps this story would inspire someone to open their heart and home. Because sometimes the ones we think need saving are the ones who save us. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many other animals are still out there, waiting for a second chance. Leo found his family, but there are countless others who need love, warmth, and a place to call home. What do you think about Leo's journey? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a story like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this story to inspire others. And if you can, consider supporting a local shelter or adopting a stray. You might just find a hero waiting for you.